October 29, 1948. A high school football field in Donora, Pennsylvania. The players are down on their hands and knees, desperately crawling through the grass. They're searching for a football they literally cannot see. They're breathing in this thick, yellow soup. It tastes exactly like a struck match. The fog rolling in is so incredibly heavy that cheerleaders on the sidelines are completely blinded. Referees are out there blowing whistles into this solid wall of mustard-colored vapor, totally unable to see the plays. And up in the bleachers, an old man starts to cough, and he just can't stop. 14,000, that's how many folks are crammed into Donora, wedged onto this narrow river bend. It's your classic tight-knit company town, completely dependent on the U.S. Steel Wire Works and a massive zinc plant sitting just downstream. Locals actually called the surrounding area the dead zone, and for good reason. That zinc plant was an absolute monster, running around the clock, bilching out a continuous black ridge of sulfur dioxide and hydrogen fluoride. The exhaust was so toxic that there wasn't a single surviving blade of grass, no weeds, not one living tree left on the hillside. The local cattle even developed this crippling fluorosis. Their teeth were literally falling out. But, the townspeople accepted this incredibly dark bargain for the sake of steady wages. They just lived under a sky the color of weak tea. But then, on Wednesday, October 27th, the normal rules of meteorology just flipped. Usually, smoke rises up, right? The air above is cooler, so pollution drifts away and disperses. But what hit Donora was a massive temperature inversion. The cold air got entirely trapped at the bottom, making it physically impossible for it to rise or let any of that smoke escape. It's basically a meteorological lid. A layer of warm air just parks right over a layer of cold air, sealing the entire valley shut like a giant mason jar. So think about what that means. Every single breath, every single exhalation from those towering industrial chimneys stayed exactly where it was. It accumulated and concentrated with absolutely nowhere to go. So Wednesday, this chill fog settles in. Thursday, nobody panics. The mills and furnaces just keep roaring like always. But by Friday afternoon, the sulfur dioxide hits these unrecorded deadly levels. It gets so dark that by Friday evening, street lights have to be left on at high noon. Drivers are literally creeping down Main Street with their heads hanging entirely out their windows, just trying to navigate by looking at the curb. And then the weekend hits, and reality turns horrifying. Saturday morning, the dying starts. An Italian grandmother, Mrs. Sella, steps out onto her front porch, just trying to get away from the weird smell in her kitchen. She sits heavily on her swing, draws a single, shallow breath, and doesn't draw another. The entire town is suffocating. You've got volunteer firemen throwing these heavy green oxygen tanks into the back of their personal cars, desperately hauling them door to door. They're finding old men slumped over kitchen tables and mothers gasping in cramped rooms with condensation-streaked wallpaper and flickering kerosene lamps. The town's tiny hospital fills up instantly and overflows right into the community center. And then the unthinkable happens. The funeral home runs out of caskets, which leads to a truly jarring situation. Mortician Rudolf Schwerha runs completely out of space. He is literally forced to embalm bodies right there on his own kitchen table. Outside on those narrow brick streets, funeral hearses are just passing each other without any of the usual ceremony, one pulling away from the curb just as another one arrives. But honestly, here is the most shocking part of this whole nightmare. Stubborn Donora, completely enveloped in toxic poison, still held its annual children's Halloween parade that Sunday. Yeah, you heard that right. Small ghosts and witches marched down a street that completely dissolved into yellow nothingness just 20 feet away. Kids had to push their masks up onto their foreheads just to gasp for air. Some were just sitting down on the curb, totally unable to go on. Finally, late Sunday night, a cold front pushed in and the rain broke the inversion. By Monday morning, the devastating toll was finally clear. Roughly 7,000 people. That's fully half the population of the entire town. 7,000 people sickened with burning eyes and lingering chest pain. And 20 people were dead. So how exactly did the company respond to half a town being poisoned? U.S. Steel called it, quote, an act of God, a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. It's a chilling statement, right? And it basically set a 70-year corporate template of absolute denial without ever admitting fault. Their defense was honestly audacious. They offered a timely settlement, but firmly without admitting any fault whatsoever. They even commissioned this internal study that literally blamed the victims' unfortunate genetics and weak hearts. They completely denied the emissions played any role. And within a week, the zinc works just fired up and reopened its smokestacks. But the truth was out, and it couldn't be buried. The United States Public Health Service sent investigators. National reporters started walking down those smog-stained streets. Walter Winchell put Donora right on the radio, and Life magazine published photographs showing the undeniable reality. Industrial emissions, trapped by the weather, killed those people. And this absolute tragedy cracked the door open for real federal action. In 1955, the government passed the Air Pollution Control Act. By 1963, we got the first true Clean Air Act. And by 1970, the Cleaner Act was expanded, the EPA was officially created, and hard limits were finally set on the exact poisons that killed Mrs. Sella on her front porch. The impact of that legislation is just staggering. The EPA conservatively estimates that the laws born from the ashes of Donora now prevent over 200,000 premature deaths in America every single year. Today, if you walk past the old Chamber of Commerce building in modern-day Donora, you'll see a painted sign. It simply reads, "Clean air started here." A town that had to choke before a country would listen. And it leaves you wondering, on the very fields where kids still play football today, what invisible compromises are we breathing in right now?